Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 27th of July, 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. Well, the weather, I was going to say the same old news, but not quite, but the same old weather. Apparently, Dubai is red hot. The rest of UK appears to be slightly grey and a little bit drizzly. So there we are. We'll move on from that to, of course, important international news, and what better place to start than with the BBC. And here we are. This is what we get from our £3.65 billion BBC. This is important news to do with a gay radio station in South Africa. So we can't investigate Iraq or Afghanistan or Libya, Syria, Mike, can't do that. We can't investigate Tony Blair. We can't investigate the demise of the NHS. We can't investigate child abuse, but we can promote South African gay radio stations. Now, what particularly upsets me about this is that, of course, UK Column has now been running for quite some time, and we've had no offers at all of promotion by the BBC. Do you think there's a reason for that?
I think it's very unfair.
Okay, well, there we are. That's what we get for our money, $3.65 billion. To talk about gay radio stations in South Africa. But of course, it takes The Guardian to report on the important news in UK, and we just thought we'd bring this up on screen. One of our viewers sent it in to us, so it's The Guardian, colourful, carnivalesque, transgressive, the club that's saving queer nightlife. Now, remember a little while ago we reported that the queer agenda was being brought into schools. Well, what are they promoting here? Do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, is really what's going on. And they're very keen to say that this little act started with a 6'5" drag queen on a crucifix being wheeled out on stage. Okay. So our viewer particularly upset by this article. And we just say, as always, we like to have a look at who the journalists are behind the scenes. So this one is this lady, Amelia Abraham, and if you have a look at her Twitter page, she is happy to retweet some pretty unpleasant stuff. So Guardian, fully intellectual newspaper, which alongside the BBC would have us believe that this sort of material is what the nation really needs to be concerned about.
Yeah,
there's a reason for it, of course, Mike.
Well, let's move on. Well, happy birthday to the Bank of England. Bank of England was created on this day in 1694. So hopefully this is going to be the last birthday for the Bank of England, because they continue to stagger me with with what's going on. So, of course, in the media this week, today and yesterday, we've got this nonsense about how great the GDP figures for the UK are after Brexit. Headlines all saying the economy doing very well. But of course, whatever the economy is doing, well or not, it's got nothing whatever to do with Brexit. The headlines also saying that companies have revealed a gloomy outlook for trade in the latest CBI Industrial Trends survey. They're saying that, well, Brexit has, on one hand, done really good things for the economy. On the other hand, it's done very bad things for the economy. What's the Bank of England saying? They're saying that very likely, come their meeting next week on the 4th of August, they're going to reduce interest rates by 0.25%, because the economy needs more stimulus. So here we are back into the language of a few years ago, stimulus, and they're even talking about increasing quantitative easing again. Now, the point here is that none of the underlying issues with the economy, none of the underlying issues with the financial system have been dealt with. And Brexit has, as I say, absolutely nothing to do with that. So the £375 billion level that quantitative easing is currently at is likely to be increased. And of course, the big elephant in the room, for the financial system at least, is Deutsche Bank. We've been covering this over the last few weeks. Their profits have plunged, and actually by quite staggering levels, because last year their net profit was 800 million euros or so, and that has collapsed, I believe, to 20 million euros, 20 million euros net profit for a bank the size of Deutsche Bank is staggering. What is at the heart of this? Well, of course, Deutsche Bank has huge derivatives exposure. $72 trillion is the figure that's normally bandied about. And of course, that's a gross figure. And derivatives contracts, well, if they're allowed to net out in an organized fashion, what are you looking at? A net figure of 0.1% of that. So the net figure is usually considered to be manageable by the banks. But of course, in uncertain times, you're not guaranteed to see derivatives contracts net out in an organized fashion. It's likely to become disorganized very quickly. Contagion is the word that they like to use. And then you see a collapse happening. And Deutsche Bank absolutely at the forefront of that. A $22 million profit this year is a spectacular disaster for a bank the size of Deutsche Bank.
And of course, this is one of the key big banks that was heavily promoted by political charity Common Purpose. Indeed, Lehman Brothers were actually put forward as a role model for school children. And with the Spotlight Fund, I think it was called, Common Purpose was also promoting Deutsche Bank. So very interesting that future leaders focusing on the skills and business entrepreneurship of bankers, and we're now seeing these bankers simply wander around like headless chickens as the empires start to collapse. But let's remember, it was Common Purpose that was suggesting that our children should take these people as role models.
Yes. Now, just before we leave banks and the Bank of England, just mention that HSBC has been in the news in the last couple of weeks, obviously because of this ongoing scandal over foreign exchange trading and the fact that two of their top people have been arrested, at least one arrested in the United States, the other in the United Kingdom. Not quite sure what the situation is with him, but the Stuart Scott, one of those two people, was sitting on the Bank of England's chief dealers subgroup, which is there to inform the bank about the mechanics of the markets in quarterly meetings while that fraud was going on. So the question then is, did he inform the Bank of England while that fraud was going on, because that's what he was for, or not? Now, the Bank of England, of course, would deny that they knew anything about any wrongdoing, but this wouldn't be the first time that there have been direct connections between fraud on the markets and the Bank of England itself. So it comes back to the question of if the Bank of England is providing a service to the nation, but it's also providing a service to the financial system, then where there's a conflict of interest there.
Well, I think it would be called arm's length operations, Mike. Chinese wall doing absolutely nothing.
Okay, and now this next story from The Guardian is from Australia. This is the head of the competition regulator in Australia, but he is making points which I think are equally applicable to the United Kingdom. So this is Rod Sims. He's the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission chairman, and he's previously very pro-privatisation of national assets. But he said that, according to this article, governments have repeatedly botched the sale of airports, electricity infrastructure and major ports, making things worse for consumers because when selling the assets, they've been motivated by maximising profits rather than making efficiency gains. He says that governments have created private monopolies rather than public monopolies without sufficient regulation to stop those monopolies overcharging users. And he said, I've been a very strong advocate of privatisation for probably 30 years. I believe it enhances economic efficiency, but I'm now almost at the point of opposing privatisation because it's been done to boost proceeds, it's been done to boost asset sales, and I think it's severely damaged our economy. Well, if you look at how the utilities privatisations were done, beginning with Margaret Thatcher in this country, and what they've done is create this notion of a market. It's a fraudulent market, in fact, because what they've done is they've created a cartel, and they've made the market so complicated to navigate. And of course, they're pushing this idea: well, just change your energy supplier, and you'll get
savings.
You'll make savings. But of course, this is all part of the scam. And the real serious part of the scam, as far as I'm concerned, is that of course the infrastructure costs remained with the taxpayer. So if we want to develop our infrastructure, we've got to pay for that. while these companies, these privatized companies, are making huge profits for providing what? A call center?
Yeah.
That's about the height of it.
That is.
And finally, for this section then, this is Andrew Percy, MP, and what's he been talking about? The Northern Powerhouse. This is this notion that we're going to see this massive economic growth in the north of England. But of course, the economic aspect of it is being used as a sort of carrot. But what's behind it is devolution and a change in the governance structures. So he's doing an historic tour, he's describing it as, of the north, because they're saying that these devolution deals that have been agreed in Sheffield, Greater Manchester, the North East, Tees Valley and Liverpool, that these are absolutely still front and centre of the government's agenda. They're saying that key achievements to date for the Northern Powerhouse are these historic devolution deals. They're also saying that 55% of the population of the Northern Powerhouse will vote in an elected mayor next year. That is part of the problem here. We'll talk about that in a second. And then they go on to try to sweeten the thing with the economic news that major investment in transport has been committed to, including new rail franchises, attracting foreign investment, 127% growth in foreign direct investment projects, all this kind of stuff, which isn't really producing any real tangible benefit to people. But what is being changed is the governance structure, and we've been talking about the big society and what it is and what it represents. It's a communitarian form of government. It's taking centralized control to the lowest level. It's creating these elected mayors who will join, undoubtedly, the global parliament of mayors. And it's subverting the nation. It's subverting national structures, national institutions, and national constitutions. And that's the bit that's of particular concern.
And of course, we should remember Eric Pickles calmly stating publicly that he was an unlikely revolutionary as he's talking about the implementation of big society and this change through communities, which of course is originally based on that Alinsky agenda. So being pushed by both the Conservatives and Labour, and of course that's a major clue that the policy is coming from somebody behind the political parties. Right, well, we'd just like to say that we've had a phenomenal response to the interview that we did yesterday with the Metropolitan Police whistleblower, John. I've had some quite remarkable comments coming back about that. But it's also brought up debate about other areas to do with child abuse, and in particular, people who are heavily focused on what is happening in the Asian and Muslim communities. And we've decided that today it merits a look into what's really happening, because it is so important that people understand how communities are being heavily manipulated in this country with the ultimate agenda of causing chaos and breakdown. So if we just bring in the subject to the police whistleblower, an extremely brave man who has taken huge risks to get the truth out to the public about what had been going on in the background. And in essence, it's this. We've got child abuse, trafficking and prostitution on an industrial scale in London and the UK. The police have been fully aware of this for years. This came out very, very clearly, but they have deliberately been doing nothing. The establishment figures have been involved, but they have been protected, and that is a key part of what is going on. And at the same time, we've got the whistleblowers, including this very brave detective constable from the Met, being threatened and bullied. And by threatened, we don't even mean just in the professional sense, if you like, within his work, but serious threats. And then we've got the political and establishment part of our society controlling the cover-up itself. And ultimately, we've got the police, politicians, local authorities, social services, even the charities who say they're there to protect children, conspiring in a cover-up to prevent the public understanding what is really happening and responding. And the key message that comes out is that the political establishment is the root cause and promoter of child abuse. So this is our start point. Now, we've got here a tweet that was sent. I've taken out some of the circulating addresses on it because we're just interested in the content. But a police whistleblower talks about a massive cover-up by the government and the police. And one of the first responses I got in is immediately focusing on Rotherham and Asian child abusers. So here we are, rape, grooming gangs covered up for years. Now, what is really going on here? Because there is a heavy agenda on this. We've got protection of the largely white, and certainly if we're going back 10, 20, 30 or more years, overwhelmingly white establishment controllers of the trafficking and abuse. They were white, and to a large extent they still are. We've got protection of the police controllers of trafficking and the abuse and the cover-up of the children. And we've got a focus now on Asian gangs. And we are saying very clearly that this is to help inflame white, Asian, Christian, Muslim hatred. And there's a reason for this. And it is to create chaos and violence in the UK, because once that's been created, in will come the police state powers, and ultimately the establishment controllers are going to win. Now, how do we put evidence in front of our viewers and listeners? Well, most of it has already appeared in the public domain, but what we need to do is put some of the pieces in order. So let's come back to this case of Oxford and Cherwell Valley College, where an Asian man blew the whistle on abuse by white youngsters. And this was our headline, A Good Samaritan. This man was victimized for protecting white youngsters from white abusers. Now, what actually happened? Well, the Asian Muslim exposes the white abusers. He does exactly the right thing. He then faces disciplinary action and is bullied out of his job. Thames Valley Police take no action initially, then they also join in the harassment and bullying of the whistleblower. UK Column takes up the story, and after a few months, the key abusers were sacked. They were too hot to handle, so they lost their jobs, but they walked free with no police criminal action. So they were simply allowed to go, having been forced out of their jobs. And Thames Valley Police then continued to boast about prosecuting Asians under Operation Bullfinch, and they've since received millions of pounds for new operations, which they say are to be targeted on Asians.
And if I remember rightly, the white ringleader of this was quietly taken to court with no media coverage.
Correct. Mr. Big, he was known locally in Oxford as Mr. Big, but this was a white, we will say, businessman in inverted commas. He was taken into a court which was so secret, even local Oxfordshire newspapers were excluded, so that there was no reporting. And as far as the local community are aware, that man was then put back out into society where, according to local reports, he was allowed to continue to fester and grow these abuse rings. Now, that, of course, is a hearsay comment, but the sources within the community in Oxford have been very clear that this is what took place. And the closed court aspect was reported in local Oxfordshire papers. So special treatment of a mysterious man who was one of the ringleaders of the abuse within Oxford. So let's take what we've just covered and see whether we can add to that. So we're bringing the Asian gangs, which we've just talked about, and what we can say. Well, the police deliberately remained silent on the gangs, allowing the child abuse problem to grow. Then they suddenly take action, and as a result of that, we saw a huge backlash amongst the community and wider afield against what was seen as Asian paedophile gangs, Asian abuse of young girls. So the whole problem branded Asian, but the police had been deliberately silent for years. Contrast it with Oxford, when somebody in the Asian community comes forward to warn of abusers, and in fact the Asians have been warning of both white and Asian child abusers, the police take no action on their information. And what does that do? It inflames community tensions, and of course it hides the true scale of the abuse. Now we bring in a Met Police whistleblower who comes forward to say that he has first-hand knowledge that the police have deliberately protected child abuse gangs for years, and also at the same time protected the political elitist people involved in that abuse. So we've got a public focus on the Asian agenda, and the public are thus being distracted from the top-tier political and establishment child abusers. Where does that take us? Well, the political and establishment controllers achieve what they really want, which is a public hate agenda between Muslims, Christians, Asians, whites. And this helps them move towards this state of emergency in the Civil Contingencies Act. So the child abuse is being used as a weapon, and in a very devious and clever way. Can we take it on a little bit further? Well, the answer is we can, because if we then encapsulate what we've just covered, let's add some more pieces to it. So this is where we've got to now. We're saying that we can see child abuse is being skewed to achieve this devious political agenda. Let's remember that when whistleblowers come forward, how the government treats them. So Melanie Shaw reports widespread child abuse by white abusers within care homes, within children's homes in Nottingham. That leads to Operation Or, an investigation of some 8 children's homes altogether. How is she rewarded for her whistleblowing? She has her son taken away by social services, and she's put in prison, and she is still in prison at this moment, into her 8th week, I think, in solitary confinement. Let's add the next part, and here we go, because we can now bring in Janice and Brian Doherty. So what is the crime of this mum and dad? Well, they simply reported that a man had approached them because he wanted to buy their disabled son for abuse. When they report this to the police, they're ultimately victimised and harassed and have their own children taken from them. There is no allegation of any criminal complaint against the parents, nor have they neglected or harmed their children. So this is clearly a silencing exercise if you report a paedophile ring. Compare that to John, the Met police officer, who is saying the same tactics were applied to him as a police officer. When he blows the whistle on this, basically it's covered up. I see that somebody is saying this sounds complicated. I'm just going to say, please stay with us, because the pieces are all in front of the public. We have a massive cover-up of child abuse in order to achieve a political agenda. So the police officer reported to the Minister for Policing, and if we can just pop that on screen again, let's bring in this gentleman. His whole responsibility to look after policing and protect whistleblowers. What did he do? Nothing. Silence. And of course, the Home Secretary at the time that our Met police officer was reporting what was going on was Theresa May, now the Prime Minister. And in that top image, there is yet another police officer saying that the government covered up abuse in the 1970s. So we've got a nice little circle of abuse. And if we ask, what is the new Home Secretary going to do? Well, to date, we can say absolutely nothing.
No.
I'll just ask you, Mike, how else could we express to people that they are being played on baited hooks here, that the political establishment controls the child abuse, it runs the children's homes, it covers up the abuse, it protects the paedophiles, it imprisons the whistleblowers, and people are saying they still can't understand what's going on?
Absolutely not. And one of the other criticisms that was made of us yesterday was that we were apologising for the Muslim community, and that was over the Rouen attack. And I just want to say, of course, what we're not doing here is attempting to justify the actions of any group or any individuals. If a criminal act has been committed, it's a criminal act. I don't care whether the person that committed it was Muslim, Christian, black, Asian, white. I don't care. It's a criminal act. They should go to prison for it. What we're talking about here is a broader political agenda behind these events, which is manipulating these events, and particularly manipulating the way that these events are being presented in the media in order to produce a particular outcome.
And reaction, outcome and reaction by the public. And we can see this reaction is working so well because we've got so many people focusing on immigration as the problem, or they're focusing on the Asian community as the problem, where they should be focusing on is who is controlling this overall thing, which brings us back to our own government and, of course, the people pulling the puppet strings of whoever it is, Blair, Cameron, or Theresa May, Nick Clegg.
So let's talk about a bit more about the terrorist agenda and ISIS. Now, back in 2011, I was interviewed on Theo Chalmers on Edge Media, and Theo Chalmers' second program, which was One Step Beyond. And I was talking about Syria right at the very beginning of the Syrian conflict. And Theo gave me quite a hard time about it and pressed me quite hard because I had made the statement that when the protesters were out protesting against Assad and when they were out getting shot by snipers, I said that in fact those snipers were from outside Syria. They were not Assad government forces. Now that has proven to be correct as time has gone on. And of course, what we should point out here and remind everybody is that as that Syrian conflict evolved into so-called civil war, what we had was the British government, and specifically Brooks Newmark, heading off to Syria. If we can put Brooks up on the screen, thanks Theo. Heading off to Syria in order to run some kind of back-channel negotiation with the armed opposition in Syria. And so when that failed, however, sorry, put that back, Theo, please. When that failed, however, the baton was passed over to Prince Bandar, and Prince Bandar was put in charge of Saudi Arabian intelligence, and he was given the task of reorganizing the Syrian opposition following the vote in Parliament, which caused us not to go and bomb at that time in 2013, right? So Bandar was put in charge of that. He then reorganized the Syrian opposition. He built up al-Nusra Front, he built up ISIS, he built up the other so-called moderate terrorist organizations with the backing of the British and American governments. And in the process, Syria was turned from this into this, right? So Syria destroyed, and as a result, we have constant headlines of dozens of people being killed in bomb blasts and so on. And as a result, the migrant crisis was created. It was created. These people are being herded. They aren't coming here voluntarily. They're coming here to escape something. They're being herded. And as a result, then, we had this situation in France yesterday where a priest has his throat cut in a church and is murdered. That has to be condemned. It was a case of murder, but it also has to be seen in the broader context. So when we see headlines like this in the Express today, that Muslims have forced Fireman Sam producers to apologize after Fireman Sam, who is an animated character for those that don't know on children's television, when the character stepped on a page of the Quran in this this children's animation, that when we see headlines saying Muslims have forced their producers to apologize for that, and when we see other headlines saying that British security services are warning that a Muslim attack, an ISIS attack in the UK is very likely, as churches are on terror alert after the Normandy priest murder. And what's ironic about that is that many of the people who focus on the Muslim threat in this country will do so on one hand, while at the same time saying that the July 7th bombings in London were a British intelligence operation and it wasn't Muslims at all. So I don't quite see how those two positions gel. What we're saying here is very clever propaganda in the media to push a particular agenda. And what we're seeing, frankly, is the multi-headed hydra. And the problem is that while people focus on these issues like it's the Muslims, it's chemtrails, it's this, that, it's the other thing, they're all fighting the heads of the hydra and they're not fighting the body. And as you know, when you cut the head off the hydra, another head grows in its place. So this is just to reinforce the point you were making a moment ago, Brian, because if we can't see the bigger picture and we can't see who's driving this stuff, we are not going to win this battle.
Not going to win at all. We can win it, but at the moment there's got to be some refocusing of people to see exactly what Mike's described, that we've got to go for the body of the beast. And the propaganda at the moment, which is spewing out of the British government, including, of course, the BBC, that's what it's there for, is to distract the public into any area which is away from what we really need to be looking at, which is that who has the total control over the political and social policy, economic policy that's coming through. And of course, that must, the moment we go digging into that, that must take us straight back in the direction of the City of London, where we know the monetary power base is. But of course, we're now discovering from whistleblowers, and my goodness, that Metropolitan Police officer deserves some public support, because he is showing that, of course, the rest of it is in that same area. So what are the children there for? The children are there for the playthings of the rich and powerful, but of course hanging off that is blackmail. And that is the system which is being used to control the political elite in Britain, so they do the bidding. We have to focus. The two key areas are money. Stay with the money trail, that's always true. But the second thing is the children. And if people are misguided enough to think that the abuse of the children stems with the Asian or Muslim community, then they've got something very badly wrong, because this is a massive abuse ring which has gone on for, we're certainly going to say tens of years, but we're probably into the hundreds of years. Where is it being run from? It's being run from the heart of British government. So if we deal with these key issues, we're going to be well on the way to dealing with the body of the beast. And it's very interesting that as Justin Walker and the British Constitution Group have been ramping up on the importance of the Bradbury pound and methods of taking the banks back under control. That may include Glass-Steagall as well, I'm sure Mike would say. But if we get control of these powerful people, then we can regain control of our country. But certainly we won't be getting there if people fall into the trap of going for one of the Hydra's heads, which takes them effectively into a blind alley. We don't know how more explicit we could be on this subject, but we just can see that as the political agenda unfolds, Britain is being dismantled on a day-by-day basis. This is what the city-state agenda is about. It's what the devolution agenda, the Northern Powerhouse, is about. We've got Northern Ireland under attack. We've got Scotland under attack. And the people attacking the country are in fact our own, it is our own government, rather than people that have been displaced and brought into the country. So we'll probably leave it there for today. Somebody has said in our chat room, UK column is on fire today. We think we need to be, because one policeman has now given this nation the truth about the scale of the criminality and corruption at the heart of the British government. And if we can't protect our own children, we certainly can't trust these people on any other policy that they're putting forward. So we now know, and it's up to us to take it forward. If you haven't listened to that audio interview...
It's playing straight out after this news.
It's playing straight out after the news. For a link, you can point people at the front page of the UK column. Please listen to it. Please consider what this man is saying. And please also consider what you will do personally to support him and the other very brave whistleblowers who are now speaking out to warn what is happening in Britain. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.